They all thought she'd come crawling back, the ex-wife, the outsider, the woman they'd long since erased. But when the will was read, and everything was left to her, silence fell. Grace Sterling had parked her worn sedan a few blocks from the gleaming tower of Hartwell Associates, taking those few minutes on foot to steady herself. 15 years had passed since her divorce from Marcus. 15 years spent rebuilding her life while watching him grow richer and their children grow more distant. Marcus had died 6 weeks earlier after a private battle with cancer, and Grace hadn't attended the funeral. She wasn't welcome anymore. Still, the letter came, summoning her to the reading. Her old purse dug into her side as the weight of the manila envelope pressed harder than the 15 years of silence that lived on her chest. In the marble lobby, the receptionist looked up at her name, recognition briefly flickering before professionalism took over. 14th floor. Mahogany. Conference room. Grace was just on time. No reason to spend a moment longer than necessary. In the elevator, her reflection stared back. Silver-streaked hair neatly styled, minimal makeup, not flashy like Vanessa's polished glamour, but not broken either. When the conference room door opened, every head turned. Vanessa sat at the head like a queen in black silk, Blake and Chloe at her sides, cold and composed, mirror images of their father. The room buzzed with whispers as Grace took a seat in the corner, well away from Vanessa's throne. Blake was the first to speak. Why is she even here? Dad divorced her 15 years ago. His words were sharp, but Grace had worn emotional armor for years. Vanessa smirked, suggesting Grace was there hoping for a sentimental token. Surely Marcus hadn't kept her in mind. The word what we built together, stabbed through the air, even though most of the empire had been Marcus's long before Vanessa. Grace said nothing, her eyes finding a seascape painting across the room, imagining herself somewhere far away, calm and distant. Then Richard Kensington, Marcus's longtime partner, approached with mock confusion. This is for family and close associates only. Blake cut in. She's not family, don't worry. Richard chuckled. Thought someone let the cleaning lady in, and the room laughed. Grace felt her cheeks burn, but stayed composed. I was invited by Mr. Hartwell, she replied coolly. Richard backed off, muttering to Blake, who smirked. Grace exhaled. She wasn't here to argue. She was here because Marcus wanted her here. Vanessa's voice cut in again. Is that the same dress from the 2006 gala? Giggles followed. Grace stayed calm. Across the room, Chloe met her eyes briefly. Something soft there. Blake whispered, and the moment passed. Chloe raised, her phone, filming, mocking. Mom's still in department store clearance. The same daughter who once made glitter cards for Mother's Day, now weaponizing her mother for likes. Blake approached her with lowered voice. This isn't your family. I don't know why Hartwell invited you, but you should go. Grace looked into her eyes, and replied gently, I have as much right to be here as anyone. Mr. Hartwell asked me to come. Blake's voice turned cold. Dad said you abandoned us. You were emotionally gone before the divorce. That's why he left. The lie Marcus had spun replayed again, painting himself as the victim and her as cold. She never fought it, not publicly. I hope one day you'll want to hear my side, she said. Blake snapped. We already have the evidence. Therapist. Bills, your emails. You wanted space. Grace knew what he didn't. Those bills came after Marcus's first affair, with his assistant, years before Vanessa. Those emails were misread, written when she needed time to process betrayal. You were 11, she whispered. But Blake cut her off. Save it. I'm not a kid anymore. Dad made a choice. So did we, and he turned back to Vanessa. An assistant entered, announcing Mr. Hartwell would begin shortly. No seat was set for Grace at the main table. No surprise. She remained in the corner, and the assistant gave a polite nod. You can stay where you are. Vanessa sat regally. Blake and Chloe at her side, heirs to a legacy of silence. Grace looked at them. Her children, yes, but now they were strangers. The ache was physical. 15 years of being sidelined, misjudged, and rewritten in the story of her own life. Grace Sterling sat quietly in the corner of that mahogany-paneled room as Harrison Hartwell, tall, silver-haired, and cloaked, in the authority of old money and old secrets, stepped in with a leather-bound folder and began to speak. The will, he explained, had been revised 6 months before Marcus's death, after his diagnosis, but before the illness took everything except his clarity and regret. Grace tightened her grip on the armrest as Hartwell read, To my first wife, Grace Sterling, who gave me the best years of her life. The room stopped breathing. Vanessa's lips parted, her smile vanishing like mist. Blake stiffened, Chloe blinked rapidly, and Richard looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Hartwell continued without pause. To Grace, I leave my entire estate, valued at approximately $50 million, including full ownership of Sterling Innovations, all real estate, investments, and personal assets, to be transferred immediately upon my death. A stunned gasp echoed. Vanessa's skin turned waxy. Blake slumped in disbelief. Then Chloe dropped her phone onto the table with a thud, her wide eyes now fixed on Grace, no longer filled with venom, but confusion and dawning realization. This is not legal, Vanessa whispered, voice trembling. Hartwell replied evenly, It is. Marcus Sterling was of sound mind and the will has been verified. Vanessa's name came next, but the numbers were cold and sharp. $100,000 and her personal effects. Blake and Chloe each received $50,000, plus forgiveness of sizable debts. Grace remained still, her heart pounding but her face composed. Around her, the empire they had tried to take away was quietly, completely, returning to her. Then came Marcus's final letter. Handwritten, recorded, raw. Hartwell read aloud, as Marcus's voice filled the room with trembling truth. He apologized to Grace for the lies, for painting her as distant and cold to justify his own guilt and cowardice, for turning their children against her. He begged forgiveness. Vanessa erupted, calling him delusional, claiming medication warped his mind, but Hartwell silenced her, stating 2 doctors had independently confirmed Marcus's mental clarity. Then came the final blow. Marcus revealed Vanessa's 2-year affair with Richard Kensington, confirmed, documented, and confessed. Richard fled the room like a man set on fire. Vanessa stood frozen, all pretense gone. Marcus addressed Blake and Chloe directly in the recording, admitting his failures as a father, and pleading with them to see Grace for who she truly was, to give her a chance, if not for his sake, then for their own. Silence took hold again, thicker than before. Vanessa stormed out, swearing to contest the will, but Grace calmly mentioned the no contest clause. She revealed Marcus's envelope, filled with emails, texts, missed calls, showing his attempts to reconnect. Blake read them in disbelief, the anger he'd carried beginning to fracture. Chloe whispered, You and Dad made peace? And Grace nodded softly. After the diagnosis, we worked through years of silence and he finally told the truth. Vanessa accused her of manipulation, but Grace simply said, Forgiveness heals the one who gives it as much as the one who receives it. And she turned to Blake and Chloe, not demanding, not begging, only offering a chance to build something new. He proposed selling the mansion to them or even Vanessa at a reduced rate, suggested forming a family-led board to guide Sterling Innovations, and offered therapy. Blake, torn and trembling, kissed her cheek, his first act of warmth in years. Later, Grace, Blake, and Chloe sat in a quiet cafe, speaking like survivors of a long war, about pain, mistakes, and the fragile threads of love still waiting to be rewoven. Vanessa's legal threats still circled, but they no longer mattered. The true inheritance wasn't measured in millions, it was the opportunity to heal. A month later, Grace stood in her sunlit studio, surrounded by canvas and quiet. She painted a vast seascape, storm-dark waters meeting a sky just beginning to clear, a portrait of grief, resilience, and release. Around her, other women gathered. Women, scarred by life, seeking second chances through color and creation. On a chain around her neck hung Marcus's wedding band, not as a token of loss, but a quiet emblem of forgiveness, and everything it cost. In that studio, in that light, Grace Sterling knew she was finally home, not in wealth, not in legacy, but in truth. So now I ask you, have you ever carried a hurt so deep it hardened into silence? Have you ever chosen peace over pride? If Grace's journey speaks to you, share your story below. Your words might be the bridge someone else needs to begin again. And if you believe in redemption, in healing, in second chances, then stay. Because some stories don't end, they begin. Again with Grace.